Tune. Do you believe that an unexpected encounter can change the destiny of two lives forever? In a few moments, you will learn the story of a widowed mother who becomes the sole support of a broken multimillionaire. Each choice they make opens doors to secrets, sacrifices, and surprising discoveries that few would dare to face until the end. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel now and leave your like. This way you help us bring you more impactful and twist-filled stories. To support her daughter, a courageous widow decides to work as a caregiver for a paraplegic multimillionaire. But the twists and turns that follow are breathtaking. Read on to find out in this story that begins aboard a sparkling dark blue Bentley Urus EWB. Darius Alvarez Pennington drove in silence, mesmerized by the winding road that stretched along the shores of Lake Iskallvatn in Iceland. The snow-capped mountains towering around him formed an imposing backdrop. Beside him, his fiancée, Selena Patterson, tapped her long nails on the screen of a fancy cell phone. "Sometimes, the people who should be planting flowers in our garden pick off our petals," she sighed. "We've been together for over a year, Darius," Selena continued, looking annoyed. "Why did it take so long to formalize the marriage? Or was it never your intention?" Darius let out a sigh and continued to stare at the road, his voice echoing with restrained control. "Doesn't this Bentley, the trip to Iceland, and the ring you're wearing count as some sign of progress? Where did I stray from what your commitment manual calls for?" Selena rolled her eyes, making her annoyance clear. "Do you think a fancy car and a trip to the ice make up for a year of waiting for something? In concrete, is that all I fit into? An exotic adventure on your business resume and the occasional getaway? If you wanted something serious, we'd plan the wedding now instead of driving around these frozen lands." Fingers firmly on the steering wheel, Darius struggled to maintain his composure. He gave her a quick glance before replying coldly, "I thought you understood something essential, Selena. It's not a document that legitimizes a feeling, but the way people walk together. Sometimes I wonder if we're still walking in the same direction." She stared at him, her face full of hurt. "It's hard to walk side by side when everything revolves around your desires, isn't it?" He remained silent for a few moments, the air vibrating only with the soft roar of the engine and the blowing of the wind on the windows. At the end, a dry smile appeared on his face. "Since everything is my fault, and you consider yourself the owner of the truth, enlighten me. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Who knows? If you can answer this riddle, I will be convinced that you are brilliant enough to solve even what science has not defined. Then yes, I will be sure that you are the perfect partner to face life by my side." Selena looked at him, stunned, before reacting. "What a stupid question. There is no answer to that, Darius." He raised his eyebrow, firm. "What if it does? Maybe the problem isn't the question, but rather the person trying to solve it." The argument heated up. Selena, focused on the provocation, didn't notice that Darius, distraught, had moved a little into the opposite lane on a treacherous curve. At that moment, a truck sped by, its headlights blazing like two suns. In a split second, Darius understood that when the world comes crashing down on you, all that's left is to protect the ones you love. In a desperate reflex, he turned the steering wheel to absorb the impact on his side of the car, shielding Selena. He felt himself being handed a fate he could not control, only face. The impact was devastating, metal twisting in a crash and sudden darkness swallowing him whole. When life destroys us, it also invites us to be reborn from the ashes. Hours later, the cold light of the emergency room blinded him as doctors explained the severity of his fractures. Darius listened motionless. "The damage to the spinal cord is significant. We believe the mobility of his legs has been permanently compromised." Beside him, Selena, miraculously intact from the maneuver he had performed, observed herself in a mirror, indifferent. "That's terrible," he murmured, with a coldness that sounded like an empty gesture. You could hire a very famous physical therapist, I imagine. Darius closed his eyes without answering. He realized that it wasn't just his body that had changed, but the understanding that sometimes losing one's mobility isn't the greatest tragedy. What's worse is recognizing the coldness in the soul of someone we thought we loved. The afternoon fell like liquid gold through the windows of the estate, casting a soft glow on the austere walls. Darius, in a wheelchair, stared into the distance, snow-capped mountains and a grey Icelandic sky. His face was a grim combination of physical pain and inner revolt. The cruelest burden can be a soul loaded with resentment. Behind him, Selena was applying lipstick with exaggerated precision, examining her own reflection without paying attention to the expression of suffering written on it. In a burst, he whispered, "I wanted a decent bath. It's suffocating to depend on someone to help me with every gesture." Selena, still fixing her makeup, responded with the coldest of indifference. "Don't worry, I've hired someone to take care of you." Darius turned his chair slightly to face her. There was irritation and disbelief in his eyes. "And you didn't even ask my opinion?" She laughed disdainfully. "Honey, do you really think I would ruin my impeccable nails for this? What kind of bride would I be if I didn't get someone professional to deal with your new condition?" Selena turned around, adjusting her designer bag and smiling artificially. "You'll be in good hands. I'm going for a walk. I'll be back tonight." Before leaving, he leaned over to whisper to the person who had just arrived. "What's your name? Give him a good bath. Remove all that bitterness. Do you understand?" And she left, slamming the door. The newcomer stood up straight, her body firm, her eyes steady, exuding compassion and professionalism. There are people who, in silence, choose to be the hands that help. She approached, stopping at a respectful distance from Darius. In a soft tone, "Good afternoon, Mr. Pennington. I am Esther Johansson. I have come to help you today at your fiancé's request." He didn't look at her right away. He hated the idea of needing assistance for something as trivial as a bath. "Why does a stranger have to help me do something so basic?" he muttered, his voice thick with resentment. "I didn't hire her." She remained calm, without shying away from the discomfort. "A bath will renew your well-being, sir. Sometimes it is in the simplest things that we find strength again." Darius stared at her, face hardened. "Nothing will give me well-being. I'm just a broken man tied to a chair that reminds me of this at every moment." The silence in the room was broken by a light breeze coming through the window. Esther, looking at him sweetly, replied, "The soul reveals itself in the depth of our pain. Remaining still can teach us to fly within." He faltered, feeling something break in his bitterness. His expression softened, and in a whisper he conceded, "Okay." "Prepare the bath." Esther gave him a delicate smile, without any air of triumph. She disappeared into the bathroom, leaving him alone with confused thoughts. Within a few minutes, the sound of running water spread, creating an almost comforting atmosphere. When Esther returned, she gently led Darius into the shower. She used gentle scents such as lavender, eucalyptus, and rosemary, which enveloped the room in a soothing mist. "Let's take a deep breath, sir," she said as she gently wiped the sponge. "As you exhale, imagine releasing everything that afflicts you." He reluctantly followed her instructions in silence, but he noticed her shoulders relax. Her movements were light and respectful until she lightly touched a large scar on his back. The question sprang to mind. Did that happen because of the accident? Darius closed his eyes, the memory taking over him. "It was surgery to try to save my spine after the impact. Now I have inert legs and a grotesque scar that defines me." Esther stood her ground. "What you did that day shows great courage. You acted to protect those who were by your side, even at a very high price." He reacted with disdain. "Courage that only got me this chair and this scar that I hate. She went back to massaging, speaking in a tone that sounded like a universal truth. The marks of time are not defects, but maps that point our way home. Darius let out a poisoned laugh. I prefer real maps. And what's this story about going home? Ridiculous. Esther did not deviate. Coming home is finding your way back to yourself, sir. He felt a tremor run through his body. He didn't know how to react. He just nodded in silent consent. The rising steam mixed with an echo. She speaks to me as if she knew me from another time. After finishing his bath, Esther helped him transfer to the wheelchair and then to the bed. If you allow, I can offer you a therapeutic massage to stimulate your legs, he suggested, bringing out special oils. Darius twisted his face suspiciously. And where does your knowledge come from? She started the movements lightly. I learned from my mother when I was a child. She believed that by putting your soul in your hands, you can create more than just a simple touch. He wanted to scoff, but something held him back. She was speaking in the past tense, so she... Esther nodded, her voice full of longing. Yes, he passed away a few years ago, but he left me with precious lessons. He taught me to see hope where many see defeat. Darius commented, full of resentment. It's easy to talk about hope when you're not confined. Without stopping the massage, she explained, Mom was blind, but she transformed the world around her. He fell silent, embarrassed. Sorry, he muttered, feeling stupid. But what do you do when life breaks you? Esther sighed, her fingers running over his sleeping muscles. She told me, water does not flow where the ground is smooth, but through the cracks. Sometimes it is through the cracks that life begins to circulate again. A lump in Darius's throat prevented him from formulating another reply. His thoughts were in turmoil, entangled by those simple words. Suddenly, in the middle of that session, he moved his fingers slightly. Wait, he exclaimed, a sparkle in his eyes. I felt something, a slight tingling. Esther did not stop playing, but there was a contained emotion on her face. Your body is remembering what it can do. Have no doubts, sir. He took a deep breath. I don't know if I believe in miracles. She held his hand firmly. It can be your own miracle if you start believing. There was a moment of immersive silence, broken by a soft knock on the door. They exchanged apprehensive glances. The door opened slowly, revealing a little girl of about 7, with brown hair and lively eyes, similar to Esther's. Mommy, I found you, she cried, hugging her mother's legs. I looked for you all over the house. I did what you asked. I don't think anyone saw me. The color drained from Esther's face. She tried to explain herself, distressed. Mr. Pennington, forgive me. I asked my daughter to stay in her room. It won't happen again. Darius pressed his lips together, his expression contorted. My fiancé hates children, and I in this state don't like them either. But the girl was direct. What happened to your legs, young man? Mum says that what we lack in one part, life makes up for in another, and that makes us special. The silence that followed weighed more than any argument. Darius was at a loss for words. Embarrassed, Esther tried to lead her daughter out. Come on, Lexia, that's enough, we can't. He raised his hand. Leave her. She is welcome here, just like you. Show her how she can help me, even if it is just for a little relief. Esther barely held back her tears, while Lexia smiled radiantly. I'll help. I want to be a physiotherapist when I grow up. Darius found himself smiling. Something in him was breaking. Barriers built up over years of pride and emptiness. And let's see, the days passed. Afternoon after afternoon, Esther applied techniques with self-taught precision, while Lexia repeated the same procedures in her childlike way. The sensations in Darius's legs slowly intensified. Tiny but constant reflexes appeared. Incredible, he murmured, testing the movement of his feet. Does this really exist, or is it imagination? Esther smiled, wiping away the sweat. Your body didn't give up on you, sir. It just needed to find its way again. The child excited. It's like when you're asleep and don't want to get out of bed, but if you insist, your body wakes up. Selena, on the other hand, spent the whole day outside, avoiding interactions. Her distance highlighted the contrast between the coldness she represented and the increasingly genuine warmth of that new bond that united Darius to the two visitors. One afternoon, after a session that left Darius exhausted, he ventured, "Esther, are you married?" She denied with a slight blush. "I raised Lexia alone." Her father simply left. Darius grumbled bitterly. Either he was crazy or he didn't live in this world. Only that justifies abandoning someone like you. She smiled, blushing even more, continuing the task of mobilizing her joints to keep them from stiffening. He sighed. "I thought I had it all. But now I feel like maybe I never really had it." Esther interrupted for a second. "Perhaps the truly rich are not those who accumulate, but those who need less to find happiness." With each word, Darius felt his soul tremble. The man who had once looked down on everyone now began to look up to something he did not fully understand: the greatness of an authentic heart. The routine was creating roots of hope. After weeks, they set up a set of parallel bars and a harness on the mansion's terrace that would support some of Darius's weight. Esther tested everything carefully, while Lexia ran around cheering. "Today he will get up, won't he, Mom?" Esther replied cautiously, "Let's try. It's gradual progress, but we must persist. He needs a lot of support, including ours." With trembling arms, Darius placed his hands on the bars and fastened the harness, but the silence was abruptly broken by Selena's stormy arrival. "What kind of circus is this?" he complained, his face filled with anger. "And why is this little girl here?" Lexia took a step back, startled. Esther, despite being nervous, explained, "Ma'am, I ask you not to interfere. We are in a crucial training session. If he feels confident, he may stand for a few seconds." Selena let out a derisive laugh. "So now you, a simple maid, understand more than the doctors who said this was impossible. What audacity!" Esther kept her composure, but the little girl couldn't contain herself. "Don't talk to my mother like that." Selena, with a sharp look, decreed, "Forget it. I'm going to fire you and your insolent daughter. How dare you disobey me? I never authorized you to play physical therapist. You're here to give him a bath, that's all." Lexia started to cry. Esther tried to calm her down, but Selena moved towards Darius. "And you, with all your education and knowledge, listening to the advice of a servant, aren't you ashamed?" He clenched his fists on the bars, breathing heavily. Then he pushed, pushing himself forward. A tremor ran through his legs, but he managed to stand up, if only for a few moments. His sweat-soaked face showed pain and triumph. Lexia cried out, "You did it! He's up!" Selena, surprised, hesitated, and Darius, without letting go of the bars, looked at her. "Get your things. You have 10 minutes. Get out of my mansion." Disbelief transfigured Selena's face, and she tried to argue. "Don't talk like that, dear. Look how strong you are. You just needed a little push, you know. I really wanted to motivate you." But he shook his head. "You didn't believe it, Selena, and you can't imagine what it made me see." Desperately, she waved her hands. "So let's get married, okay? It's finally on. Let's make plans." He held her gaze. "I already have the answer to the question I asked before the accident, remember? Which came first, the chicken or the egg?" "You never answered, but I just heard from someone who has the real solution." She frowned. "What nonsense is this?" Darius glanced at Esther. "Can you remind me of the answer?" Esther stepped back, a little embarrassed, but repeated, "First came the intention, because nothing arises without the purpose of existing." Selena laughed again, irritated. "How absurd!" He sighed. "I promised I would propose to the person who could show me more than my own limitations. And it wasn't you who gave me the right answer, Selena. It was Esther. So go. It's over." Stunned, Selena stumbled out of the room. Exhausted, Darius sagged his arms and slumped back into his wheelchair, sweating profusely. Esther and Lexia immediately surrounded him, looking worried. He looked up, still staggering, and stared at Esther. "I have a question for you. Will you be my wife?" She blinked, excited. "And why would I accept it?" Darius smiled, his voice hoarse from effort. "Because I love you, in a way I can't deny." Esther let the tears roll. "I love you too, Darius. With all my being." Lexia hugged them both. "I love you too, Daddy." The sun kissed the horizon, sealing that new chapter. Months later, in a small, inconspicuous church, Darius walked down the aisle using a walker, his steps uncertain but full of courage. Waiting at the altar, Esther was resplendent in a simple white dress, with Lexia by her side with a bouquet. The man who had lost everything had now discovered the true everything and understood the great lesson: never judge a book by its cover. When the ceremony ended and the guests dispersed, Darius and Esther found an intimate moment in the flower gardens. Lexia ran through the petals, laughing. Darius looked at the girl and then back to Esther, overcome with tenderness. "Before you, my life was nothing but ruins. I didn't know that sometimes those who should plant flowers tear off our petals. But you not only planted new flowers, you also took care of my wounded roots." She, with tears in her eyes, smiled back. "The roots are invisible, but it is from them that we draw strength. And now we flourish together, as a family." Lexia, with a handful of petals, came running back. "Look, I got you a little gift." The wind blew lightly, scattering the petals as the three shared a radiant embrace. What was being drawn there was not just a happy ending, but the beginning of something greater, based on a love that overcame the limitations of the body and the marks of the past. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Share it on WhatsApp and comment your name to receive a special greeting.